Microsoft Dev Tunnels enables developers to create secure tunneled connections between external endpoints, effectively sharing local web services across the internet. The tool's accessibility is noteworthy. It requires only a free executable and a Microsoft account without any verification requirements. But like any powerful tool placed in the wrong hands, Dev Tunnels has become a double-edged sword. Threat actors have discovered multiple ways to weaponize its capabilities, each method offering its own unique blend of advantages and trade-offs for malicious activities. Before diving into the specific methods of misusing Dev Tunnels connections, let's examine the core of any basic compromise, that crucial network connection between victim and adversary systems. From this basic two-party scenario, Dev Tunnels introduces a third critical player to the equation, the Microsoft Dev Tunnel server. Based on this, Dev Tunnels can be configured in two fundamentally different ways. A half tunnel establishes a connection between just one endpoint, either the victim system or the adversary system, and the Microsoft Dev Tunnel server. This creates only one segment of the potential communication path. In contrast, a full tunnel creates a complete endpoint-to-endpoint connection that bridges both systems through the Dev Tunnel server, enabling direct communication between the victim and the adversary systems. Further, the tunnel can accommodate different types of traffic flows to effectively mask their true nature. When used for C2, the tunnel carries egress traffic from victim to adversary, facilitating the typical command response pattern of C2 communication. Alternatively, when used for remote access protocols like RDP or SSH, the tunnel carries ingress traffic flowing from the adversary to the victim system. However, here's the crucial aspect that makes this particularly significant for security. Regardless of the actual traffic direction or protocol being used, the tunnel always presents itself to the victim's network as outbound TLS traffic. This means that even when an adversary is actively connecting inbound to a victim system, for instance through RDP, the connection appears in network logs and monitoring tools as a standard outbound HTTPS connection originating from the victim's network. Based on this, there are three main ways in which Dev Tunnels may be misused by threat actors. Tunneling Egress C2 traffic using a half tunnel, tunneling Egress C2 traffic using a full tunnel, or tunneling Ingress traffic using a full tunnel. Using a half tunnel for C2 traffic provides threat actors with a powerful advantage: a free redirector service protected by Microsoft's certificate infrastructure. By simply registering with an email address, attackers gain access to Microsoft-signed domains and certificates that would typically require extensive verification or cloud service subscriptions to obtain legitimately. Now, while the C2 traffic pattern remains unchanged and potentially detectable, the connection terminates at a trusted Microsoft endpoint, making it more likely to bypass initial security controls that rely on certificate and domain reputation. By running Dev Tunnels on both systems, the C2 traffic is fully encapsulated within the tunnel, gaining the additional advantage of the Microsoft signed process handling network communication on the victim's end. However, this requires successfully deploying and executing the Dev Tunnels application on the victim system, which demands higher privileges and creates additional operational security risks. The third approach, using a full tunnel for inbound remote access protocols like RDP or SSH, offers unique advantages for maintaining persistent access to compromised systems. Now, while this method effectively bypasses common network security controls by disguising inbound connections as outbound HTTPS traffic, it's limited to protocols that normally listen for incoming connections and isn't compatible with traditional C2 frameworks. Now, for this Malware of the Day video, we will focus specifically on analyzing the full tunnel configuration for Egress C2 traffic using the Havoc C2 framework. The attack chain began when the adversary acquired initial access to the target system with a private IP of 10.0.0.4 through an initial access broker on the dark web. Now, this access provided them with a foothold via a reverse shell, which offered the advantage of being relatively stealthy, but which also restricted their ability to execute more sophisticated attack sequences necessary for their intended campaign. Now, to advance their ultimate objectives of ransomware and extortion, the adversary decided to implement command and control infrastructure. And this would provide them with the required expanded capabilities within the victim's network. The adversary began by configuring their Havoc C2 server at 70.24.242.42 to listen for incoming connections on port 443 bound to the local interface. They then executed the DevTunnels application on this same system, which established a connection to the Microsoft DevTunnels server at 21.20.56.11, and this crucial step effectively transposed the listening port from their local interface to the DevTunnels server. To complete the full tunnel configuration, the adversary leveraged their existing shell access to deploy and execute the DevTunnels application on the victim's system. This additional tunnel segment had the effect of transposing the listening port once again, this time to the victim system's local host interface. The adversary then generated a Havoc HTTPS payload specifically configured to connect to this local listener. For payload delivery, the adversary created a download link using WeTransfer. This choice was strategic. WeTransfer serves as a legitimate file sharing service commonly used in business environments, making it less likely to trigger security alerts. Additionally, its high reputation score often allows it to bypass URL filtering. Using their shell access, the adversary downloaded and executed the payload on the victim's system. The payload connected to the local listener, which was mediated by the trusted MS DevTunnel process. It then tunneled this connection through the Microsoft DevTunnel server back to the adversary's C2 server. This setup established a robust C2 channel that appeared as a legitimate outbound HTTPS traffic to Microsoft infrastructure, while providing the adversary with the enhanced capabilities needed to pursue their broader campaign objectives. During routine network threat hunting using RITA, our organization discovered an interesting and unusual connection. The connection caught our attention for several reasons. First, while the beacon score was low at 5.4%, the connection duration stretched across almost the entire 24-hour capture period, suggesting a persistent connection rather than normal intermittent business traffic. Our team of analysts were also particularly intrigued by the destination FQDN. Though the domain appeared legitimate, being part of Microsoft's infrastructure, it was not one we recognized from our environment's normal Microsoft service usage patterns. Now, to find out more about this specific connection, we can pivot to Zeek. Since RITA only provides us with the destination FQDN, we can use Zeek's DNS log to find the specific IP associated with this FQDN. In examining the DNS log, we discovered an interesting DNS resolution chain. Now we can see that the query for this FQDN followed a CNAME that is a canonical name chain, a series of DNS alias records that ultimately pointed to the actual host. The chain moved through several intermediary domains before resolving to the IP address 21.20.56.11. Additionally, since we learned in RITA that this is an HTTPS connection, we might do well to look at some of the key details of the certificate, which we can find in X509 log. However, to get there, we'll first need to navigate through two other logs, conlog and SSL log. Since we know our IP, as well as the destination IP and port, we can locate any one of the 13 connections between this specific host pair over HTTPS in conlog. Critically, what we're really after here is the UID, the unique ID. Now, this is core to Zeek's logging system. It allows us to track this same connection on other logs, much like how a key is used in relational databases to connect entries in different tables with one another. So we can now use this UID in SSL log to find the certificate fingerprints. And we can see that SSL log provides us with fingerprints for the server, intermediate, and root certificates. We can now use any one of these three to pivot one final time to X509 log. As expected, given the Microsoft domain, we found a valid certificate issued by Microsoft Azure, issued to this FQDN with Microsoft Corporation listed as the subject organization. Looking at the certificate details, we can also note that it's a relatively new certificate, valid from August 24, 2024 through August 19, 2025, and the certificate uses standard secure parameters, all of which align with current best practices for TLS certificates. So with the IP address now identified and the certificate details validated, we can turn to AC Hunter to learn more about this connection. Since we know both the IP as well as the fact that this connection was persistent, we can easily find the connection of interest in AC Hunter's long connection module. AC Hunter also confirms that the ASN is 8075 and that this indeed appears to be a legitimate Microsoft server. AC Hunter also provides a convenient way to select among a number of external reputation checks. We then reviewed the IP in Abuse IPDB, which all but confirmed that this is indeed a legitimate Microsoft server. However, this verification did not mean we could relax our investigation. Threat actors frequently misuse legitimate Microsoft infrastructure for malicious purposes. The validation of the server's legitimacy simply confirmed we were dealing with authentic Microsoft services, which warranted even closer scrutiny of how these services were being utilized within our environment. Our investigation has uncovered several suspicious and unusual properties of the connection in question. The evidence gathered from our primary threat hunting tools likely warrants alerting the incident response team for further investigation. Following their strict guidance and instructions, as we're now under their jurisdiction, we can delve deeper into the endpoint to see what we may discover. Now, knowing our target IP, we can use System Informer, formerly known as Process Hacker, to identify the process mediating this connection. After opening System Informer with administrative privileges, we click the Network tab at the top. This displays a list of processes, including the external host IP each is connecting to. Looking at the System Informer output, we identified devtunnel.exe as the process responsible for the outbound connection to our IP of interest. This suggested we were dealing with a Microsoft dev tunnel, with this process acting as the mediator for the tunneled connection. However, given that malware often attempts to masquerade as legitimate processes, we needed to verify that this was genuinely the Microsoft Dev Tunnel's executable and not simply a malicious payload named to appear legitimate. To confirm this, we examined the process properties in System Informer. Now, when examining the process details in System Informer, we noted that devtunnel.exe carried a verified Microsoft digital signature, confirming this was indeed the legitimate Microsoft DevTunnels application and not a malicious impersonator. While this verification of authenticity might initially seem reassuring, our subsequent consultation with IT stakeholders revealed a concerning detail. Microsoft DevTunnels was not an approved application within our organization. This raised two possibilities. Either this represented a shadow IT scenario where an employee was using unauthorized tools, or more worryingly, given recent research showing how attackers can leverage Microsoft DevTunnels for C2 communications, this could indicate malicious activity. With these concerns in mind, we returned to examine the System Informer process connection overview once again. And here we discovered something we had initially overlooked. First, we can see that DevTunnel listens on localhost port 443 and also maintains an established connection to the Microsoft DevTunnel server on port 443. When we examine bestfriend.exe's connections, we notice it has an established connection to localhost on a specific port. Now, crucially, we can also see that devtunnel.exe has a corresponding established connection to this very same port. Now, this indicates that these two processes are communicating with each other through this local connection. Now, this pattern of connection reveals that bestfriend.exe connects to devtunnel.exe's listener on localhost, and devtunnel.exe then forwards this traffic through its established connection to the Microsoft DevTunnel server. Now, this matches behavior we would expect from tunneling C2 agent communication. Finally, by looking at bestfriend.exe's properties, we see that, unlike devtunnels.exe, it does not possess a digital certificate. Microsoft DevTunnels represents a powerful dual-use tool that, while valuable for legitimate development purposes, introduces security concerns due to its accessibility and versatility as an attack vector. This analysis has revealed that misusing it presents three major opportunities. Egress traffic is mediated by a process with a valid Microsoft certificate. Egress traffic is directed to a host over port 443 with a valid Microsoft X509 certificate. And traffic is encrypted in the tunnel, obscuring the nature of the underlying traffic, including its direction. Through our investigation, which began as routine threat hunting, we discovered how these characteristics manifest in real attacks. What started as an unusual persistent connection in RITA led us through network forensics and endpoint analysis, ultimately revealing a C2 channel tunneled through Microsoft's infrastructure. The endpoint investigation proved crucial, showing how the legitimate signed devtunnel.exe process was being used to tunnel traffic from an unsigned bestfriend.exe, a classic pattern for full tunnel C2 configuration. However, this case also reveals effective detection strategies. Network security monitoring tools like RITA and AC Hunter are particularly valuable for identifying DevTunnels abuse through their connection duration tracking capabilities. Since DevTunnels maintains persistent connections, these will accumulate significant duration times and rise to the top of a long connection tables, making them relatively easy to spot during routine analysis, especially in environments where legitimate DevTunnels usage is uncommon or unauthorized. Organizations can also implement straightforward detection rules at the DNS level. Microsoft DevTunnels uses specific documented domains and subdomains for its operations, so security teams can configure their IDS to alert on any DNS queries to these domains. This is a particularly effective approach in environments where DevTunnels isn't explicitly permitted, as any resolution attempts for these domains would indicate unauthorized usage requiring investigation. This case emphasizes that while attackers may leverage legitimate tools and their infrastructure, their usage patterns often betray their presence. Through careful monitoring, organizations can effectively detect and investigate potential DevTunnels abuse, even when it comes wrapped in Microsoft's trusted infrastructure.